Imagine this. You're lost at sea, your only companions are the relentless waves, an endless horizon, and the memories, haunting memories, of your partner who didn't survive. For José Salvador Alvarenga, this wasn't a nightmare, it was his reality. Over 438 days, Alvarenga drifted across the vast Pacific Ocean. Surviving against impossible odds, alone and resourceful, he faced starvation, storms, predators, and the crushing weight of solitude. But how does someone endure such isolation? What drives a person to fight for survival when hope seems like a distant memory? And most of all, what lessons can we draw from his harrowing odyssey? In this episode, we'll dive deep into Alvarenga's incredible journey, beginning with a fateful fishing trip off the coast of Mexico and ending on the shores of a remote Pacific island, thousands of miles from where he started. We'll explore the psychological battles he waged, the ingenious survival tactics he used, and the controversies that followed his story. Stay with us as we uncover one of the most remarkable tales of survival in modern history. 438 days at sea and a lifetime of lessons to unpack. Welcome to Beneath the Shadows, the podcast where we delve into the darker corners of history, mystery, and survival. I'm your host, Travis Fenn, and together we uncover the stories that haunt our past and inspire our present. A great look for the future. So, as I stated, today we embark on the incredible, extraordinary journey of resilience and survival, the mortifying tale of José Salvador Alvarenga. This story is not just about survival, it's about human willpower, resourcefulness, and the relentless spirit to live, even in the face of unimaginable odds. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you for coming back and checking out another episode. Thank you for coming here for the first time if you're a new listener, and I really appreciate you being here. If you enjoy exploring these compelling narratives as much as I enjoy sharing them, please hit the follow button, subscribe button, download on your favorite podcast platform, Amazon Music, iTunes Podcasts, whatever Apple's thing is, any of those, Spotify. Please give me a rating or review if you love the show. It really helps us keep moving forward. It really helps build the show and get new people listening, and I really appreciate everyone for doing that. I want to say thank you for doing that. Also, I want to invite you to connect with Beneath the Shadows on social media. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Beneath the Shadows Podcast for updates, sneak peeks, and bonus content. I'm really trying to do more on those. Not a huge social media person as it is coming into making this show and trying to get into the groove of it every week for the show has been kind of on the back burner, I guess I would say. It's not the front thing. I'm trying to really focus on research and getting details for these shows, getting scripts done for these shows, and getting everything in order so I can record, get this edited, and get it out on a certain day. And speaking of that, I was originally releasing these on Sundays. I figured it would be a good way to go into the week. But with personal scheduling, with the holidays just passing, things have kind of taken a little bit of a turn, and I would say that shows are going to be coming out on Wednesdays now. Generally, I have Sundays and Mondays off to do recording and stuff, and I work the other 5 days of the week. So, always working on the podcast, but always have to have money to do a lot of this shit too, so I have a day job. I've moved it a couple of days, 3 days forward to Wednesdays. Shows will be coming out on Wednesdays. You can still look forward to Patreon, so please check that out as well, Beneath the Shadows on Patreon, and there will be episodes coming out at least once a month. I'm going to say every other week, just depending on exactly what I'm doing for the main show. If I have a lot of research and stuff to do, or if my schedule gets a little too hectic, it might be only once a month. But if you want to go and check that out, that is over at patreon.com, Patreon. That's Patreon, Beneath the Shadows on Patreon. There are extra episodes up on there. There are a lot of the ones that are already published as well. So like the free episodes, the Patreon bonus episodes are all available on there, and there will be more coming out that will be exclusive to Patreon, so please check that out. It's $3 a month for those extra episodes, and I really appreciate you supporting the show and doing that, so thank you so much. Your support keeps the shadows illuminated, as I would like to say. Now, let's set sail into the open seas and uncover the incredible story of survival that pushed one man to the very edge of endurance. So I'm going to try and do the story a little bit different today. Nothing like crazy different, but instead of just script, I'm going to try and, freeball it a little bit, kind of go off and do my own little thing. I'm going to generally go on the script, but I might, trail off a little bit or try to interject with my own lines a little bit more than what I have written down. So we're going to do that, and we're going to see how that works for us today. And hopefully it's a little bit more fun. Hopefully it's a little bit more interactive. Hopefully it can engage the audience that is you guys a little bit more. And like I said, I appreciate you being here. So thank you for checking it out. This is a story that I really love. I found the book, 438 Days, an adventure of something. But it's 438 Days by Jonathan Franklin. Jonathan Franklin wrote a book in 2016. I think it's 2015. Wrote a book, and it's a great book. It really inspired me, and it inspired me to do this episode. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the book. Please check out the book. It has a lot more details to it. But I'm going to give you kind of a broken down version of that book and of what exactly happened with Salvador here. José Salvador Alvarenga goes by Salvador. I might call him Alvarenga for a lot of it, just because it's, his last name. It's specific. It is only refers to him. He likes to go by, like I said, Salvador. I'm going to call him Alvarenga, and let's dive into this thing. As their boat crossed the calm waters of the Marshall Islands Lagoon, deep in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, the policemen couldn't take their eyes off the man sprawled on the deck before them. It was evident that he had been at sea for an extraordinary length of time. His hair jutted upward in tangled clumps, resembling a bush, while his beard spread widely in every direction. His ankles were swollen, his wrists were alarmingly thin, and he could barely stand. Avoiding eye contact, he frequently turned away, shielding himself from scrutiny. The man was Salvador Alvarenga, a 36-year-old fisherman from El Salvador. 14 months earlier, he had set out off the coast of Mexico in a small fishing boat. 23 feet, actually. It's a tiny boat. It's amazing that he's able to survive in this boat, accompanied by a young crewmate. Now he was being transported to Eben Atoll, the southernmost point of the Marshall Islands, and the nearest inhabited location to where he washed ashore. He had drifted an astonishing 6,700 miles from where he began his journey, enduring 438 days lost at sea. During his seemingly endless drift across the Pacific, Alvarenga had faced profound challenges: loneliness, crushing depression, and even thoughts of ending his own life. Yet, amidst the isolation, he learned to coexist in a vivid world full of wild creatures, vivid hallucinations, and utter solitude. Despite his resilience, nothing could have prepared him for what awaited: global fame and becoming a figure of public fascination. A few days after his rescue, Alvarenga stood before a gathering of international media. Dressed in an oversized brown sweatshirt that masked his frail frame, he slowly but independently stepped off a police boat. Onlookers, expecting an emaciated and bedridden survivor, were stunned. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd as Alvarenga flashed a brief smile and waved to the cameras. Some observers couldn't help but compare him to Tom Hanks' character in Castaway, because that's exactly what this motherfucker looked like. I'll put it up on social media with Tom Hanks as one of the pictures and Alvarenga as another picture, but he looks, similar. He's a Mexican dude, so he's a little bit darker skinned. He's a little bit, I'd say a little bit more dirty looking than Tom Hanks was, and a little bit more rugged looking in some ways, but definitely looks like Tom Hanks' character in Castaway, and it's pretty fucking funny. The image of the bearded fisherman stepping onto solid ground quickly went viral, making Alvarenga a fleeting household name. 14 months adrift at sea. Who could survive such a harrowing ordeal? It sounded like the plot of a Hollywood movie, like, Castaway, a fucking Hollywood movie. The evidence was compelling. Dozens of witnesses had seen Alvarenga set sail and heard his SOS calls. When he finally washed ashore in the very boat that he had left Mexico in, thousands of miles away, his refusal to speak to the press only fueled curiosity. A handwritten note taped on his hospital door pleaded with reporters to leave him in peace. Later, back in his homeland of El Salvador, he recounted his ordeal in painstaking detail. Over the course of more than 40 interviews, he painted a vivid and often brutal picture of his survival at sea. This is the incredible story of his journey. José Salvador Alvarenga was born on July 14th of 1975 in the coastal town of Garita Palmera, located in Ahuachupan, El Salvador. Growing up in a small fishing community, his childhood was defined by the rhythm of the tides and the camaraderie of the close-knit village. Surrounded by a hard-working family, Alvarenga learned the basics of fishing early, a skill that would become the backbone of his life. Yet, even from a young age, Alvarenga displayed a zest for life that went beyond the quiet shores of his hometown. In his late teens and early 20s, Alvarenga's personality began to shine. Known for his humor, infectious laughter, and ability to make friends with anyone, he thrived in social settings. While he carried the work ethic of a fisherman, he began to also develop a reputation for his carefree attitude and love for celebration. Life was often a balance of long, grueling days on the water, followed by nights spent with his friends, enjoying the simple pleasures of food, enjoying the simple pleasures of food, music, cannabis, and good company. Hell yeah. Fucking great life. Just hanging, working in the day, chilling with the homies at night, eating some food, smoking some weed, and yeah, just having a good time, listening to some music. Throw on some fucking, I don't know, Led Zeppelin or something, and just hang out with the boys. Some shit like that. In search of greater opportunities, Alvarenga left El Salvador and migrated to Mexico. There's also a lot of rumors that he may have been being tracked by some people who may have wanted to kill him due to some involvement. He wasn't actually involved. He got into a fight. Someone got stabbed in this fight and died, and someone wanted to retaliate and kill him also. Alvarenga didn't kill the dude, but he was involved in a fight where the guy died. So that's also a rumor that is a reason that he migrated and left his family, left his wife and daughter, and his parents all in El Salvador, and he went to Mexico. He also did this for work too, so I guess that's part of it. But he eventually settled in Coastal Azul, Chiapas, Chiapas, Coastal Azul, which means blue coast. There he found work as a fisherman and quickly integrated himself into the vibrant culture. The coastal lifestyle suited him perfectly. His days were spent battling the sea in pursuit of sharks and tuna, so he was a deep sea fisherman, went 70 to 100 miles off the coast, couldn't see fucking land, just hanging out, deep sea fishing, real hardcore. While his nights came alive with revelry, he loved to hang out, drink, smoke weed, chill with the boys, like I said, hang with the homies, do a bunch of cool shit, and really enjoy his life. So he partied hard for a fucking fisherman, dude. Worked long fucking days, partied hard at night. Don't know when he slept, but he fucking did. He did it. He did fucking a lot. So Alvarenga became a fixture in the small fishing community, known for his larger-than-life personality. After a successful haul, he would often gather with fellow fishermen at local bars or beachfront gatherings. There, with a cold beer in hand and a joint in his mouth, he entertained his companions with animated stories of his adventures at sea. He loved telling tales, whether harrowing storms narrowly survived or the big catch that got away. His carefree nature extended to his relationships. Alvarenga wasn't one to settle down easily, preferring the freedom of the open ocean and the lively social life on shore. Friends described him as someone who lived in the moment, rarely worrying about the future. He loved dancing, music, and spontaneous celebrations, often organizing impromptu parties to mark everything from a fishing trip to an ordinary Tuesday. So he's like, the club's going up on a Tuesday, fucking two-stepping, joint in his mouth, hanging with the homies, beer in hand. He's just kicking it, man. He's got the club going up on a Tuesday, or, when he catches 1,000 pounds of fucking tuna, he's like, let's get this shit going. I'm going to get cashed out. I'm going to buy me some kush. I'm going to get fucking high. Get high, tell you what. Despite his partying lifestyle, Alvarenga was dependable and skilled when it came to his work. Fishing provided him with a sense of purpose and financial independence. Even if he didn't always manage to spend his earnings wisely, money came and went as quickly as the tides, often spent on rounds of drinks, meals for friends, or gifts for loved ones, or a little marijuana, because he liked to smoke a lot. All the fishermen seem to like to smoke in this tale, this story. When you read the book, they talk a lot about smoking the ganja. Tell you what, to Alvarenga, life was meant to be enjoyed, and he saw no point in holding back. And I believe that too, I really do. Go out, enjoy your fucking life, have a good time. You only got one, so do what you want to do. Really enjoy yourself, have fun with it, and as long as you're not hurting other people, fucking go buck wild. Have a great time. By November 2012, Alvarenga was thriving in coastal Azul, balancing the rugged demand of a fisherman's life with the carefree joy in his off hours. His deep-seated optimism and ability to find joy even in hardship defined him. But his devil-may-care approach to life also left him unprepared for the enormity of what lay ahead. As he prepared for yet another fishing trip, Alvarenga couldn't have imagined that his boundless energy and zest for life would soon be tested to their limits, forcing him to rely on every ounce of his spirit and resilience to survive. On November 18th, 2012, a day after setting out on another fishing trip and being battered by a powerful storm at sea, Alvarenga found himself battling more than just the open ocean. Seawater pooled around his feet, slashing relentlessly as the waves pounded his small boat. An inexperienced sailor might have panicked, frantically bailing water and losing focus on the critical task of keeping the boat aligned with the waves. But Alvarenga, a seasoned fisherman, knew better. He needed to maintain control. Alongside his inexperienced crewmate, 22-year-old Ezequiel Cordoba, he was stranded 50 miles from shore, carefully navigating a treacherous route back to land. Towering waves and relentless spray dumped hundreds of gallons of seawater into the boat. Each surge threatened to capsize or sink it. While Alvarenga focused on steering, Cordoba desperately scooped water out with buckets, his arms trembling from the effort. Their vessel, a modest 23-foot fiberglass skiff, was roughly the size of 2 pickup trucks parked end to end but offered little in terms of protection. With no cabin, windshield, or running lights, the boat was nearly invisible in the stormy sea. A large icebox on deck, about the size of a refrigerator, was packed with their haul of fresh fish, including tuna, mahi-mahi, and small sharks. If they could make it back to shore, the catch would be enough to secure income to sustain them for a week. They had, it's like 1,100 pounds or something. Over 1,000 pounds of fish is what they ended up hauling in this day. They were pulling fish left and right. They were having a great day. This storm hit them and pushed them off course. They were battling storm all night. They were supposed to do a 30-hour fishing trip into the next day, battling the storm all night. The storm is relentless and ends up lasting nearly 5 days. So they get fucked by this storm real hard. And we're going to talk about exactly how it affects them and affects this boat that they're in, this 23-foot skiff that they're fucking in. It's a tiny boat. There is no protection. There's no cover on it, nothing like that. It is an open boat. I'll have a picture of this on social media also, so please check that out. It's an open boat though, and the only thing for any protection on this boat is this fucking container that they have in the middle, this refrigerator sized container. It's an ice box that is filled to the fucking brim with fish plus some, and they're battling the storm. So let's take a look at it and see how this goes for them. The boat was heavily loaded with supplies: 70 gallons of gasoline, 16 gallons of water, 50 pounds of sardines for bait, 700 hooks, miles of fishing line, a harpoon, 3 knives, 3 buckets for bailing, a mobile phone sealed in plastic, a partially charged two-way radio, a GPS tracker that was not waterproof, and 200 pounds of ice. Every item was vital for their survival, and every gallon of water that splashed aboard threatened to render it all useless. Originally, Alvarenga had planned the trip with Ray Perez, his regular fishing partner and trusted friend. But at the last moment, Perez couldn't join, having to attend to personal affairs instead. He had to go pay some bail money or something like that, or had to go and pay some money to the jail for his sentence, and it was something like he was on probation and had to pay money for probation, and he would get the money back at the end of his probation or his house arrest or whatever the fuck it was. Had something to do with paying money to public officials for something that he was convicted of. So, determined to head out anyway, Alvarenga hastily recruited one of the men out of a handful of young men at the dock looking for work. Cordoba, a young man nicknamed Pinata, known more for his skills as a soccer player in their village rather than his seafaring experience. Until that day, the two had never exchanged a word, let alone worked together. As their boat crawled towards the coast, Alvarenga maneuvered through the waves like a surfer, slicing and gliding to avoid disaster. Cordoba, however, was quickly unraveling. Exhausted and terrified, he occasionally stopped bailing water, clinging instead to the boat's rails as he vomited and cried. So obviously the fisherman lifestyle, not for Cordoba, not something he's been doing his whole life like Alvarenga, and obviously not something he's very used to by any means. The $50 that Cordoba was promised was not seeming too meaningful right now. The $50 he had been promised for the trip now felt meaningless. Despite his strength and stamina, qualities that allowed him to work tirelessly for 12-hour shifts, he was overwhelmed by fear. While the storm raged around them, Cordoba was convinced the fragile boat would splinter, leaving them to be swallowed by the sharks that were circling below. His panic escalated into full-blown terror, and he began to scream. He began to freak out, man. He had a freak-out session. The storm is fucking going. These waves are gigantic. This boat is tiny. What the fuck are we gonna do, dude? It would be a nightmare for me, too. Can't see land. Fucking storm going. This boat is, the waves are bigger than this fucking boat. Like, what the fuck is happening here? Terrifying. That's terrifying to me. Open ocean like that, boat that could die out at any second. I mean, it's one thing if you're on like a fucking Carnival cruise, I guess, and it's like a whole city in itself, and it's still being on. If I was on a Carnival cruise and I was in a fucking storm, I'd be freaking the fuck out. Like, this shit is. I know it's not how the Titanic happened, but this boat's gonna somehow split in half like the Titanic and fucking sink. I'm gonna die. All right, so Alvarenga gripped the tiller with determination, refusing to surrender to the ferocity of the storm. The winds howled and the sea churned so violently that the harbor authorities had banned all fishing boats from departing. Yet, amid the chaos, Alvarenga spotted a hopeful sign. The clouds began to clear, lifting the oppressive gloom. Visibility improved, revealing miles of open water. And around 9 a.m., a mountain appeared faintly on the horizon. Land was just 2 hours away. They could be back home by lunchtime, laughing about their close call, eating food, and drinking coffee. But that's when disaster struck. The motor began to sputter and choke, slowly cutting off, dwindling its exertion to nothing. The motor was no longer of any use. Grabbing his radio, Alvarenga frantically called to his boss. Willie! The motor is shot! Stay calm, man. Stay calm, man. Give me your coordinates, Willie replied from the docks of Coastal Azul. We can't. The GPS isn't working, Alvarenga said. Drop your anchor, then, Willie instructed. There's no anchor, Alvarenga shouted back. He noticed it was missing before their departure, but had dismissed it as unnecessary for a deep-sea trip. So he's like, I'm going to be out on way the fuck out. The anchor isn't going to do a goddamn thing for me. I don't need it to hang out 100 miles offshore. So I'm not going to use it. And it's probably something that someone else just used and was borrowing. It sounded like if you didn't have one, you could just kind of grab one from another of the boats that were around if you knew the person and just be like, yeah, I'll get it back to you after I do my fishing or whatever the fuck. So sounds like someone else took it, maybe didn't get it back to him yet. So he was just like, I don't have an anchor, whatever. All right, hang tight. We're coming for you, Willie assured him. Come now, we're in serious trouble here, Alvarenga yelled. Those were his last words to anyone on shore. As the storm continued its assault, Alvarenga and Cordoba worked together, bracing themselves against the chaos. The morning sun illuminated the monstrous waves as they rose and fell. Each swell loomed over the boat, splitting and crashing unpredictably. To stabilize the skiff, the men leaned hard against opposite sides, counteracting its violent rolls. But the waves were merciless, colliding in midair to form massive swells. The boat rose to dizzying heights, offering a brief, vertigo-inducing view from what felt like the third floor of a building, only to plunge downward in an instant like a free-falling elevator. Their rubber beach sandals provided no grip on the slick deck, making each move treacherous. Also, let's talk about waves. Let's talk about storms. Let's talk about some crazy fucking size of waves. During storms, waves can reach upwards of 40 feet in height, and the largest ever recorded wave in the Pacific Ocean was nearly 60 feet tall. That's fucking crazy. 60 feet tall. 6 stories. Goddamn 6-story fucking wave coming at you. This was a wave measuring a whopping 58 feet in height. The Ucluelet wave. Ucluelet, Ucluelet. measuring a whopping 58 feet, like I said, but this is still tiny compared to the largest wave ever surfed, which occurred on the coast of Nazar, Portugal in October of 2020 by Sebastian Stutner, a measuring fucking crazy, incredible 86 feet. Sebastian Stutner. And if you look this up, there's actually a video of it, and this wave is fucking massive, huge, gigantic wave, and this dude looks like a little ant surfing on it. You can see him going across it and fucking coming out of it as the wave crashes down. Incredible shit. There has also been reportedly, I believe it was off the coast of Norway, I didn't write this one down, there was reportedly a wave measuring right around 100 feet tall, which, what the fuck? What is that? Still, that is, a crazy rogue wave. These rogue waves can get gigantic and get massive and get crazy, fucking 100 feet plus tall, 80 feet plus tall, but still even crazier. And I promise this is the last of the wave facts here. In July of 1958, an 8.3 magnitude earthquake at the Fairweather Fault rocked Alaska's southern coast. The ground-shaking event caused a massive landslide at nearby Lituya Bay, which triggered a devastating tsunami that ripped through the narrow body of water and killed 5 people. Herman Fritz, the lead author of a study published in 2009 in the journal Pure and Applied Geophysics, recreated the Lituya Bay tsunami using a specialized 1 to 675 scale laboratory tank mimicking the size and shape of the bay. Their team found that the maximum height of the wave responsible for leveling trees at 1,720 feet above sea level was around 492 feet tall, 150 meters, around that. So that's what their estimate was 492 feet tall, making it taller than any other wave ever recorded. 492 fucking feet tall. I can't even imagine a wall of water coming at me that is that tall. That's like The Day After Tomorrow, the shit that floods the entire coast and fucking takes Manhattan underwater or whatever in that movie. That's like that kind of wave. Bigger than that even. Fucking 492 feet? What the fuck? 50 stories? Fucking 48 stories? Something in that area? I can't even... Blows my mind. Blows my mind so incredibly, so much. Ah, wow. All right, so that was a long detour, but a lot of fun party facts there. Go share those with your friends. I know it's super interesting. Wave facts are like the craze nowadays. People are going buck wild over wave facts. So go share those ones with with your friends. And let's get back to Alvarenga and Cordoba as they fight through this treacherous storm. So it wasn't long before Alvarenga identified a major problem. Their nearly 1,100-pound haul of fresh fish Their nearly 1,100-pound haul of fresh fish was making the boat dangerously top-heavy. The weight threatened to capsize them with every swell. Without consulting Willie, Alvarenga trusted his instincts and made a tough call. They would jettison the catch, which means throw it overboard. They would return it to the ocean. One by one, they hauled the fresh fish from the cooler, heaving the carcasses overboard. Tuna, mahi-mahi, and small sharks splashed into the turbulent water. But at the last of the precious cargo sank, Alvarenga realized a new danger. The bloodied fish were sure to attract more sharks, making falling overboard almost a certain death sentence. So, they have a bunch of fucking chum in the water now, bloody fish. They're throwing it all overboard. They're probably going to attract sharks. Though I don't know how much sharks fish during storms or if they're less willing to go towards the surface during storms at all. I'm really not sure about that. I don't know if there would be a ton of sharks, but might be a death sentence if they fall off. Probably would be anyway with the storm that's going on and no motor to maneuver this fucking boat. So probably not great either way. Next, they toss the ice and excess gasoline overboard. Motors shot. They don't need that fucking gasoline anymore. In a bid to stabilize the boat, Alvarenga improvised a sea anchor by stringing together 50 buoys. These buoys were like these plastic containers, sealed plastic containers that floated on the water's surface. So he put 50 of those together, strung them from the back of the boat. These floated on the water's surface, creating a drag to help steady the craft. This would turn out to be a goddamn God-level decision on Alvarenga's part. It helped him over the entirety of his journey here, the entirety of his fucking situation that he goes through, these over a year that he is drifting at sea, it would help him immensely. A fact about the story that is often overrated, glanced over. People don't really acknowledge the fact that he did this and how much it really helps him. But by 10 a.m., the radio gave out. It was still the first day of the storm, a storm that Alvarenga anticipated would last a grueling 5 days. You know, being at sea his whole life, you can kind of get used to storms, get used to the clouds, kind of predict what's going to be happening, the air, the pressure, you know, all the different things that you really need to take note of as a fisherman or as someone who lives on the sea pretty much. Losing the GPS had been frustrating, the failed motor catastrophic. Now, with no radio, they were utterly alone. The storm battered them through the afternoon, and the men spent hour after exhausting hour bailing water from the boat. Using the same muscles in an endless repetitive motion, they managed to remove about half the water. Exhaustion overwhelmed them, but Alvarenga's frustration boiled over. Grabbing a heavy club, typically used to kill fish, he smashed the broken motor in a fit of rage. Then, seething, he hurled the useless radio and GPS into the sea. As the sun set, the storm raged on, and the icy wind left Cordoba and Alvarenga soaked and shivering. Desperate for warmth, they flipped their refrigerator-sized icebox upside down and squeezed inside. Wrapping their arms and legs around each other for warmth, they fought to keep their numb hands clenched into fists. But the rising water inside the boat meant they couldn't stay in here for long. So they had to, take turns climbing out of the icebox, frantically bailing for 10 to 15 minutes, and slowly shrinking that puddle that was growing every second. So they had to bail, switch, bail, fucking my hands are freezing, I can't feel anything, let's switch again, bail, fucking more bailing. The night brought more peril, gale force winds drove them further from shore, deep into uncharted waters. And what is a gale force wind, you ask? A gale is a strong wind. The word is typically used as a descriptor in nautical contexts. The U.S. National Weather Service defines a gale as a sustained surface wind moving at a speed between 34 and 47 knots, which is 63 to 87 kilometers per hour, or 39.1 to 54.1 miles per hour. And I know you all were super curious about that. I've just heard the gale force winds, that term, my entire life pretty much, whether it's watching movies, whether it's reading articles, whether it's a book, whatever, this or that. Gale force winds are always something I've heard, never knew what it was, so I was just curious and wanted to include that little factoid in there. So, were they back where they had started fishing the previous day? Were they drifting north towards Acapulco or south towards Panama? With only the stars to guide them, they had lost all sense of direction and distance. And direction, would be an easy one to recover after a little bit. You just have to figure out where your sun's kind of starting and ending to begin and end the day. And you at least got a generally east and generally west. I know it's not directly east, directly west, but it's very close. So you got a general direction, at least in that sense. Hey, this is east, this is west, and you can find north and south from that. So in the following days, supplies dwindled rapidly. Without bait or hooks, Alvarenga devised a daring method to catch fish. Kneeling at the boat's edge, he plunged his arms into the water up to his shoulders, scanning constantly for sharks. Pressing his chest against the hull for stability, he held his hands steady, inches apart. When a fish swam between them, he would snap his hands shut, clawing at the slippery scales. Most of them would escape, but time after time, practicing, more practicing. With that practice, Alvarenga started to master the technique. He began hauling fish aboard while dodging their defenses. Cordoba cleaned and sliced the catch with a fishing knife, cutting the flesh into strips to dry in the sun. They would feast on this fish, raw and dried, eating until their hunger subsided. Occasionally they would catch turtles or scoop up flying fish that flopped into the boat, yet thirst proved much harder to quench. Within days, Alvarenga resorted to drinking his own urine and urged Cordoba to do the same. The salty liquid wasn't revolting, but the cycle of drinking, urinating, and drinking again only worsened their dehydration. Also, it could cause some major kidney problems or, liver issues or something like that. Knowing the dangers, they resisted the overwhelming temptation to drink seawater, though, because that's probably even worse for you than your own urine. But, like I said, after a while, your own urine does not suffice. It has no more fucking anything in it that's good for you, because your body is excreting these things and does not want them. So, intaking the things that your body is excreting is not going to work out too well after a while. I was so hungry, I started eating my own fingernails, swallowing every tiny piece, Alvarenga would later recall. His desperation led him to scoop up jellyfish from the sea, swallowing them whole despite the burning sensation in his throat. It wasn't too bad, wasn't so bad, he admitted. After nearly 2 weeks adrift, Alvarenga lay in the icebox when he heard a sound. Splat, splat, splat. The unmistakable rhythm of raindrops filled his ears. "Piñata, piñata, piñata!" he shouted, jolting Cordoba awake. The two scrambled across the deck to set up a rainwater collection system Alvarenga had been mentally designing for days. Cordoba cleaned a 5-gallon bucket and positioned it under the falling rain, along with any other open containers they could muster up. Dark clouds loomed, and after enduring days of drinking urine and turtle blood, this guy, these people. So yeah, they actually, it's the main thing I believe that they were drinking for a lot of this trip to begin with, at least. So if they couldn't get any urine or they didn't have any water of any other sort, they would drink turtle blood, which apparently has a lot of minerals and vitamins and iron and shit in it. So it wasn't bad for them in some sense. They really used a lot of the minerals and the sustenance from it to help them, get through the rest of the days. Their prayers for water were finally answered. Stripping off their clothes, they reveled in the downpour, opening their mouths to drink straight from the sky. Within an hour, the bucket held a precious 2 inches of water. The men laughed and drank greedily, relishing the sweet taste of survival. Once their initial thirst was quenched, they vowed to ration the remaining water carefully, knowing it was their lifeline. Now, weeks into their ordeal, Alvarenga and Cordoba honed their survival instincts, becoming adept scavengers in the vast, desolate ocean. They learned to identify and salvage the various types of plastic debris drifting by, collecting every empty water bottle they could find. One day, a green trash bag floated within reach. The men snagged it, hauled it aboard, and tore it open. Inside, they found a treasure trove. A wad of chewed gum, which they divided and savored for its fleeting sensory pleasure. Beneath that, a greasy layer of kitchen oil. They uncovered even greater riches beyond. A partial head of cabbage, a few soggy carrots, and a quart of half-rancid milk. Despite its spoiled state, they drank the milk and treated the wilted veggies with reverence. It was the first taste of regular food in weeks, spoiled or not. Which, isn't completely true. They did have, sun-dried fish and raw fish and stuff, but it was the first time they had, store-processed kind of food that they were used to, which maybe not. They were probably used to eating fish and shit, too. It was the first taste, though, that they had of, a quote-unquote regular food in weeks, spoiled or not. With backup food secured and their hunger momentarily subdued, the men found solace in their vast, ever-changing seascape. We would talk about our mothers, Alvarenga later recalled, and how badly we behaved. We begged God to forgive us for being such bad sons. We imagined hugging them, kissing them, and promising them to work harder so they wouldn't have to work anymore. But it was too late. By the second month, Alvarenga had adapted to capturing and consuming birds and turtles, while Cordoba began to falter, both physically and mentally. So yeah, Alvarenga was catching albatrosses and catching sea turtles and was eating these animals raw, was, opening them up, was taking out their insides, and was eating as much of them as he possibly fucking could. The two men shared the same boat, but were on diverging paths. Cordoba, weakened and despondent, refused to eat after falling ill when consuming raw seabirds. So he ended up eating some raw seabirds. He was doing fine with it. And then one of them that he ate, he got pretty sick from and was, constantly puking, so he refused to eat them after that. Even as Alvarenga offered tiny bites of meat or turtle flesh, Cordoba clenched his jaw shut. His resolve was fading. Depression took hold, shutting down his body. Realizing the severity of the situation, the men made a solemn pact. If Cordoba survived, he would travel to El Salvador to visit Alvarenga's parents. If Alvarenga made it out alive, he would return to Chiapas, Mexico, to find Cordoba's mother, who had remarried an evangelical preacher. He asked me to tell his mother that he was sorry he couldn't say goodbye, Alvarenga recalled, and that they shouldn't make any more tamales for him, that they should let him go, that he had gone with God. So sad, just like, don't tell her I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye. Tell her to not make any more tamales for me, that I went with God, that I'm gone. But, it brings a tear to my eye, man. It's a hard one. It's a tough thing to have to tell someone to tell your mother that you can't say goodbye. You can't tell her one last time that you love her. You can't hug her for one last time, that she should let you go, that you're going up to heaven. So one morning, Cordoba whispered, "I am dying. I am almost gone." "Don't think like that," Alvarenga replied, desperate to comfort him. "Let's just relax." He lay down beside Cordoba, trying to provide solace. "I'm so tired. I want water," Cordoba groaned, his breath shallow and labored. Alvarenga fetched a water bottle and pressed it to Cordoba's lips, but he didn't swallow. Instead, he stretched out, his body shaking in small convulsions. His groans turned to silence as his body tensed and then relaxed. Panic overtook Alvarenga. He shouted into Cordoba's face, "Don't leave me alone! You have to fight! What am I going to do here by myself?" But there was no movement. Cordoba was gone. His eyes remained open, unblinking, slowly drying. "I propped him up to keep him out of the water," Alvarenga later recounted. "I was afraid a wave might wash him overboard. I cried for hours." The next morning, Alvarenga stared at Cordoba's lifeless body in the bow of the boat. Grief consumed him, and in his desperation, he pretended his companion was still alive. "How do you feel?" he asked the corpse. "How was your sleep?" He answered his own questions aloud, mimicking Cordoba's voice. "I slept well, and you? Have you had breakfast?" Alvarenga's mind clung to the fragile illusion, his only coping mechanism against the crushing isolation. For 6 days, Alvarenga lived alongside Cordoba's body, holding full conversations with his deceased friend. On the 6th night, as he sat in the pitch-black void of the moonless sky, he suddenly snapped out of his delusion. Realizing he was going crazy, realizing his mind was slipping, realizing he was speaking to a corpse, he knew it was time to let Cordoba go. "First, I washed his feet," Alvarenga said. "His clothes were useful, so I took off a pair of shorts and a red sweatshirt with a little skull and crossbones and put them on. Then I slid him into the water." As Cordoba's body disappeared beneath the waves, Alvarenga collapsed, fainting from the emotional and physical toll. When Alvarenga regained consciousness just minutes later, terror gripped him. "What could I do alone, without anyone to talk to?" he recounted. "Why had he died and not me? I was the one who invited him to fish. I blame myself for his death." Yet his will to survive, bolstered by a deep-seated fear of suicide, instilled by his mother's warning that those who take their own lives could never reach heaven, drove him to persist. Drove him to fucking thrive out here. He's going to go in. He's already doing pretty good, though. He's catching birds, catching turtles, catching fish. He's staying alive. He combed the ocean surface for signs of rescue, holding on to hope. And there had been a rescue party. There had been people who came out on boats as the storm kind of seized. There had been people who came out the day of the storm that really tried. They got out as far as they could without risking their own lives. And even there was a helicopter or a plane. There was a helicopter or a plane that actually went out and looked for him too within the first day or two of the storm. But there was no signs of them. There was no signs. They had drifted so far off already after a day or two that there was no signs within like 50 miles of the shore or something that this search team kind of went through. So he combed over the surface of the ocean for signs of rescue, holding on to hope. Dawn and dusk became his most critical moments. The soft light transformed blurry shapes into clear silhouettes, and the sun's intensity was easier to bear. Over time, Alvarenga's eyesight sharpened, allowing him to spot even the faintest speck on the horizon and identify it as a ship. As vessels neared, he could determine their type, most often colossal trans-Pacific container ships. So, massive, like Carnival Cruise plus size ships, these massive 5 fucking story ships or so, whatever the hell they are. They're gigantic ships, just like maybe 10 fucking story, 100-foot tall ship, some crazy nonsense that is carrying, hundreds of shipping containers that are full of, thousands, millions of pounds of shit. These mammoth barges glided through the ocean with robotic precision, their decks eerily devoid of visible crew or activity. To Alvarenga, they were ghostly leviathans, indifferent from his plight. Indifferent to his plight. Each sighting ignited a surge of energy. He would leap, wave, and shout for hours, only to watch helplessly as around 20 ships passed him without notice. Yeah, their decks were devoid of visible crew or activity. No one really saw him. The cruel rhythm of hope and disappointment tested his sanity, but it also kept him going. There was always another one. There was always something. And finally, one of them would get him, right? He knows it. He knows it. He knows it. But as they come and they go and they come and they go, 20 ships, man, the open ocean would already take everything out of me, and seeing so many ships pass by would fucking ruin me, make me feel so terrible. Even as storms occasionally pummeled his small boat, Alvarenga found solace in their brevity. The farther he drifted into the ocean's vast expanse, the less violent these tempests seemed to grow. To stave off madness, he let his imagination flourish, crafting an alternate reality so vivid that he would later claim he had experienced the greatest meals of his life and the most passionate intimacy while stranded at sea. So, he's eating fucking fish, and he's eating these birds and these turtles, and he's like, these are the greatest fucking meals I've ever had, because I'm imagining this is lobster and steak and fucking the best seasonings at a 16-star restaurant. You know what I'm saying? It's just the best food I've ever fucking had in my life. And he must have been masturbating, because if he had the most passionate intimacy ever while stranded at sea, either he's masturbating or having some fucking wet dreams, double wet dreams. So he's wet and his pants are fucking soaked because they're filled with semen. Something crazy. I don't know how he's having the most passionate intimacy ever while stranded at sea, unless, he's doing some self-pleasuring of some sort. Anyway, it was a Fantasia-like escape where he mastered the art of finding joy in solitude. Each morning, he performed a ritual, pacing back and forth across the boat. I would imagine I was walking through the world, he said. By doing this, I could convince myself I was living, not just sitting there waiting to die. And that's impressive. That's fucking great. That's something anyone could really do with themselves. By doing this, I could convince myself I was living, not just sitting there waiting to die. Honestly, if there's anything you can take from this, there's that. By doing this, just have the thought, whatever you're doing with your life, by doing this, if you can say this about the things you're doing in your life, you're doing great. By doing this, I could convince myself I was living, not just sitting there waiting to die. It's fucking inspirational, man. I don't know what else to say. That's incredible. Surrounded by an imaginary entourage of friends, family, and lovers, Alvarenga created a mental buffer against despair. His grandfather had once taught him to track time by the cycles of the moon, a skill that now became his lifeline. Counting 15 lunar cycles, he knew he had been drifting for over a year. Each passing phase only strengthened his conviction that heaven would be his next destination. But one day, as he glided along a smooth current, the sky suddenly filled with shorebirds. Alvarenga's body tensed, his eyes narrowing to focus. Moments later, a tropical island emerged in the mist, a lush, green Pacific atoll, encircled by shimmering turquoise waters. This wasn't a fleeting hallucination. Could his prayers finally have been answered? His mind raced with doubts and fears. What if the currents pulled him away? What if he drifted backward again, as had happened before? The island appeared no larger than a football field, wild and untouched, with no signs of human habitation. So he's really going to pull the castaway Tom Hanks thing, going to a fucking island, going to be stranded there, living along, trying to, stay alive until someone finds him. Making a bold decision, Alvarenga took his knife and severed the ragged line of buoys attached to his boat. The buoys that he initially threw out in that first storm, like I had said, God-level move, still attached to his boat, helped stabilize that motherfucker for over a year, and still had some of them attached. Ragged line of buoys finally cut. Without a sea anchor, he risked capsizing in even a moderate storm. Moderate waves could flip this fucking boat pretty easy. But speed, he reasoned, was more crucial than stability at this point. Within an hour, his boat was close to the island's shore. About 10 yards out, Alvarenga abandoned his vessel, plunging into the water and paddling furiously. A powerful wave lifted him and hurled him onto the beach like driftwood. As the wave receded, Alvarenga lay face down in the sand. Slowly, he reached out, scooping a handful of the sand into his palm. I held it like a treasure, he later recalled. The emaciated fisherman crawled naked across a carpet of damp palm fronds, jagged coconut shells, and scattered flowers he deemed edible. He could only stand for a few seconds before collapsing again. I was completely destroyed. Skin and bones. Nothing left but my gut and intestines, he later said. My arms had no muscle, and my thighs were scrawny and pitiful. Unbeknownst to him, Alvarenga had washed ashore on Tile Islet, a tiny piece of land within the Eben Atoll at the southernmost tip of the 1,156 islands that form the Republic of the Marshall Islands. It is one of the most remote locations on Earth. Any vessel leaving Eben in search of land would face an arduous journey. 4,000 miles northeast to Alaska, or 2,500 miles southwest to Brisbane, Australia. Had Alvarenga drifted past Eben, his likely trajectory would have carried him north of Australia, possibly to Papua New Guinea, or more likely, another 3,000 miles onward to the eastern coast of the Philippines. As he stumbled through the dense undergrowth, Alvarenga suddenly stumbled upon a small canal separating him from a modest beach house. Standing there were Emmy Lebach-Meadow and her husband, Russell Lakeydrick. Emmy, who was working on drying and husking coconuts on the island, described the surreal moment. I looked across and saw this white man. He was shouting and looked so weak and hungry. My first thought was he must have swam here after falling off a ship. Cautiously, the couple approached him, and after a few tentative exchanges, they invited the stranger into their home. Alvarenga, desperate to explain his ordeal, drew simple stick figures, a boat, a man, and the shore, but quickly abandoned the effort in frustration. So he was speaking Spanish. I believe they spoke English. They might have spoke a different language, but they did not speak Spanish. So how could a crude drawing capture a 7,000-mile odyssey at sea? How could he explain that he had been floating for over a year and did not know where he was at? His impatience boiled over as he asked for medicine and a doctor. Emmy and Russell, unable to understand his words, simply smiled and shook their heads kindly. Just, like agreeing with him, trying to make sure that he was calm, or trying to calm him, or, sedate him or subdue him, or, make him as reasonably calm and, welcomed and feel like he had someone there for him. Despite the language barrier, Alvarenga began talking incessantly, spilling out his thoughts as if the words alone could bridge the gap. The more I talked, the more we laughed, he said. I'm not sure why they were laughing, but I laughed too, at the joy of being saved. After feeding and caring for the exhausted castaway through the morning, Russell sailed across the lagoon to Eben's main town and port to alert the mayor. Within hours, a small group, including police officers and a nurse, arrived to help. They gently coaxed Alvarenga onto a boat to return to the main island, where they began nursing him back to health and piecing together the details of his incredible journey. And yeah, they would definitely have to coax him. He was just on a boat for fucking 15 months almost, over 14 months, stranded on a boat. Why the fuck would I want to get back onto a boat? But it's the only way for them to travel from one place to another around this area, and they weren't going too far. The other people knew that they were going to be out. It was a nice day. There's no clouds, no storms. So he did it. He went and, got some help and started talking with someone who could understand what he was saying. So word of Alvarenga's story spread quickly, catching the attention of a Norwegian anthropologist visiting in the area, who informed the Marshall Islands Journal. Giff Johnson penned the first story, released under the Agence France Presse, the AFP banner on January 31st of 2014. It outlined the astonishing details of Alvarenga's survival. Reporters from Hawaii, Los Angeles, and Australia scrambled to reach the remote island, eager to interview the alleged castaway. The single phone line on Eben became a battleground as journalists competed to unearth tantalizing details. Alvarenga's account carried enough hard evidence to lend it credibility. A missing persons report, a documented search and rescue operation, the alignment of his drift with known ocean currents, and his obviously frail condition. However, the story ignited heated debates online and in newsrooms worldwide. Was Alvarenga the most remarkable survivor since Ernest Shackleton, or the biggest fraud in the last half-century? Investigators confirmed the boat's registration number matched the vessel that left port on November 17, 2012, and disappeared. Guardian reporter Joe Tuckman interviewed Mexican search and rescue official Jamie Marroquin, who recounted the desperate search for Alvarenga in Cordoba. The winds were high, Marroquin explained. We had to stop the search after 2 days because of poor visibility. One investigation included speaking to people along Mexico's coast, reviewing medical records, studying maps, and consulting survival experts, including members of the U.S. Coast Guard, Navy SEALs, and seasoned Pacific adventurers like Ivan McFadden and Jason Lewis. Oceanographers and commercial fishermen familiar with the area corroborated Alvarenga's account, agreeing it was consistent with what they knew about life at sea. When he arrived at the hospital in the Marshall Islands, U.S. Embassy officials noted the extensive scarring and other damage to his body. He was out there for a long time, the U.S. ambassador confirmed. Meanwhile, Alvarenga's condition worsened. His legs and feet were severely swollen, likely because his tissues, dehydrated for so long, were now absorbing fluids excessively. After 11 days of care, doctors determined he was stable enough to return to El Salvador to reunite with his family. Alvarenga was diagnosed with anemia, and doctors suspected that his diet of raw turtles and birds had infected his liver with parasites. He feared these parasites might attack his brain. Sleep eluded him, haunted by Cordoba's death and the loneliness of celebrating survival without his friend. As soon as his strength returned, Alvarenga traveled to Mexico to fulfill a promise. He delivered a heartfelt message to Cordoba's mother, Ana Rosa, sitting with her for 2 hours and answering her every question. Life on land proved challenging. Alvarenga remained in shock for months, developing an intense fear of the water, not just the ocean, but even the sight of it. He slept with the lights on and craved constant companionship. Media interest flooded in from around the globe, prompting him to hire a lawyer to manage his interview requests. A later change in legal representation led to a lawsuit from his former lawyer, seeking a $1 million payout for an alleged contract breach. It was only a year later, as Alvarenga examined maps detailing his incredible 7,000-mile drift, that he began to grasp the magnitude of his ordeal. For 438 days, he had lived on the brink of sanity. Reflecting on his journey, he said, "I suffered hunger, thirst, and extreme loneliness, but it didn't take my life. I didn't take my life. You only get one chance to live, so appreciate it." Now, over the past hour, we've traced the incredible survival story of José Salvador Alvarenga, a man who defied the limits of human endurance and resilience. From the fatal fishing trip off the coast of Mexico, where a sudden storm set him adrift, to his 438-day journey across the Pacific Ocean. We've explored the challenges he faced, starvation, thirst, relentless isolation, and the tragic loss of his fishing companion, Ezequiel Cordoba. We've learned about the ingenuity that kept him alive, catching turtles, ripping them open, drinking their blood, becoming the turtle vampire that everyone always wanted him to be. No. Yes, but not exactly the turtle vampire part. He was definitely drinking their blood and eating turtles, but catching turtles, fish, and seabirds with his bare hands, harvesting rainwater, and scavenging debris from the ocean. We've also delved into the mental fortitude required to survive such an ordeal, and how Alvarenga created vivid fantasies and imaginary conversations to stave off loneliness and despair. And it's a huge part. In Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, it's a huge thing that he talks about, creating meaning, creating worth in your life, being there, creating some sort of, imaginary, vivid fantasy that you have meaning and something to live for. So always got to find something to live for. Even with Cordoba, or even with Alvarenga, he was living for something that he never knew if he was going to have again. He was living for these experiences, these moments every day that he made up in his fucking head. And that was enough to get him by. The thought of not being able to kill himself for not getting into heaven also helped him get by, because there's probably a lot of people who would have killed themselves or just gave up at some point, stopped eating, stopped drinking water, stopped doing enough to keep themselves going every day. So it's definitely a testament to his will, his ability, his determination, and his just want to live, his absolute and utter will to live. Finally, we examined the aftermath of his rescue on the Marshall Islands, the physical toll it took on his body, the scrutiny his story faced, and the complex process of reuniting with his family while fulfilling his promise to Cordoba's mother. So, before heading into today's final takeaways, let's slowly drift on over to our main marks. Alright, so main marks. Number 1, José Salvador Alvarenga and Ezequiel Cordoba left on November 17th, 2012 for a routine fishing trip off the coast of South Mexico in a place called Costa Azul. This would be the start of a horrific journey that both men would not complete. Number 2, shortly after embarking, their boat, a 7-meter topless fiberglass skiff equipped with a single outboard motor and a refrigerator-sized icebox for storing fish, was blown off course by a storm that lasted 5 days, during which the motor and most of the portable electronics were damaged. Though they had caught nearly 500 kilograms, 1,100 pounds of fresh fish, the pair were forced to dump it overboard to make the boat more maneuverable in the bad weather. Alvarenga managed to call his boss on a 2-way radio and request help before the radio's battery died. Having neither sails nor oars, no anchor, no running lights, and no other way to contact shore, the boat began to drift across the open ocean. Much of the fishing gear was lost or damaged during the storm, leaving them with only a handful of basic supplies and little food. Number 3. According to Alvarenga, Cordoba lost all hope around 4 months into the voyage. After becoming sick from raw food, from eating those raw birds, he became sick and did not want to eat anymore, and eventually died from starvation by refusing to eat. Alvarenga had said that he contemplated suicide for 4 days after Cordoba died, but his Christian faith prevented him from doing so. He related that Cordoba made him promise not to eat his corpse after he died, so he kept it on the boat. He sometimes spoke to the corpse, and after 6 days, fearing he was going insane, realizing that he was talking to a corpse, he threw it overboard and let him sink into the sea to have a fisherman's burial. Number 4. Alvarenga would survive by eating raw birds, fish, and turtles, while supplementing a lack of water with turtle blood and urine when necessary. Crazy. Absolutely fucking wild fact there. Instead of drinking water, because there was none available, he said, let's drink turtle blood and urine. See how that goes. See how long we can sustain ourselves off of turtle blood and urine. Actually, I think that's what I'm going to go and do after this, is I need to go and catch a turtle at the nearby lake and, get a glass of my own urine. Maybe I'll drink some turtle blood and wash it down with the urine on the back end. Or do you think it's better the other way? Urine and then turtle blood as the chaser. Number 5. Alvarenga would see anywhere between 15 and 20 ships during his cross-ocean adventure, trying to get their attention in any possible way. But with the majority of the ships being massive trans-Pacific shipping container transporters, he rarely ever saw people on the decks of these monsters. But he did apparently have one interaction that appalled him, and sank his confidence. During the passing of one vessel, Alvarenga claims that 2 men waved at him, before continuing on like it was just another day for them. Like, what the fuck? You're out in the middle of the open ocean, there is nothing else around. There's nothing else around, and you're gonna fucking wave at me? I'm in this tiny little fucking boat. What do you think I'm doing out here, you psychopaths? I'm dirty, I'm fucking sun-fried, I'm dried out, I look like shit, my hair's long as fuck. What the hell are you doing? Waving at me and continuing on? You stupid sons of a fucking bitch. I'd be so pissed. I would have died so many times out there. Give Alvarenga all the credit in the world for being able to pull this through. Also, sorry, I've been drinking water all fucking day and my throat keeps getting scratchy and scratchy and scratchy. It's probably just the time of the year. The air's so fucking dry. All right, so continuing on. Number 6. After 11 days in the hospital, Alvarenga was deemed healthy enough to return to El Salvador. However, he was diagnosed with anemia, had trouble sleeping, and developed a fear of water. In 2015, he gave a series of interviews about his ordeal to journalist Jonathan Franklin, who later turned Alvarenga's story into the book 438 Days, an extraordinary true story of survival at sea. And that's the book that I used for pretty much this entire episode. I want to give a shout out to Jonathan Franklin for a great book. I really was inspired the first time I heard it, and it's just a crazy story. He does a really good job of accounting Alvarenga's life and the details behind his drift across the ocean. So check it out if you want more details or more in-depth details about this story. Or you can go and check out The Guardian. There is an article that Jonathan Franklin wrote and took a lot of details from his book to add into this article. So go check those out. Shortly after the release of 438 Days, this is new information, the family of Cordoba sued Alvarenga for $1 million, accusing him of cannibalizing their relative in order to survive, despite Alvarenga sharing that he promised Cordoba he would not eat him and that he threw him overboard. Alvarenga's lawyer has denied this accusation. And that's it for this tale, this incredibly inspiring tale. We're going to bounce now from here out of our main marks into today's final takeaways. José Salvador Alvarenga's story is more than just a tale of survival. It's a testament to the power of the human spirit. In the face of overwhelming odds, Alvarenga's will to live carried him through one of the most extreme situations imaginable. His story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can be a lifeline, and resilience can guide us back to the light. As we reflect on his journey, let's remember the lessons he imparted, the importance of appreciating life, the strength found in perseverance, and the profound connections we share with each other, even those who are no longer with us. Thank you for joining me on this incredible voyage into survival, loss, and triumph. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to come back next week for the horrific, mortifying, and fucking terrifying story of Luis Garavito, the monster of Genova. The fucking beast of Colombia, this fucking dirtbag psychopath that murdered, raped, and killed so many people. So many boys, so many little innocent children fucked so hard by this man in so many ways. It's the most graphic, sickening, and infuriating episode of Beneath the Shadows yet, so do not miss it. Until next time, stay curious, stay strong, and remember, the most extraordinary stories often hide beneath the shadows. See you soon.
Wow.